Hello and welcome to The Game Changers, She Talks, brought to you by Credit Suisse. I'm Yvonne Chan. In 2015, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as the agreed framework for international development. It includes 17 objectives and goals to end hunger, inequality, and tackle climate change. In this video, we shine the spotlight on Goal 5, Gender Equality. UN Women pointed out that gender equality would have a multiplier effect on all global goals. And for this episode, we want to talk about why empowering women is essential to the health and social development of families, communities, and countries. When women are living safe, fulfilled, and productive lives, they can reach their full potential by contributing to the workforce and raising happier and healthier children. Women are also widely recognized as agents of change for their families, communities, and the world. But the CS Gender 3000 report shows that having children can adversely impact women's careers and financial prospects. As such, lowering the barriers that exist is crucial in allowing women to reconcile having both a career and a family. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by an outstanding women entrepreneur, Christine Amour-Levar, a purpose-driven social entrepreneur focused on sustainability, philanthropy, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. A passionate champion of female empowerment and environmental conservation, Christine set up Women on a Mission and Her Planet Earth to take all-female teams on expeditions to support worthy causes. Her Planet Earth aims to raise awareness and funds for underprivileged women affected by climate change, while Women on a Mission aims to empower women who have been subjected to violence and abuse. To date, a total of $1.5 million has been raised for charities that protect our environment and advance the position of women around the world. And we're so happy to have Christine here in studio with us. Hi, Christine. First of all, tell us about your career journey and what strengthened your resolve to become an advocate for female empowerment and environmental conservation.
Thank you, Yvonne, for this very warm introduction. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
So happy to talk to you today. So, the journey started for me very early on, and I grew up in the Philippines among very strong women. And it's interesting to note that the Philippines is often referred to as a country of driven women that directly or indirectly control the family unit, businesses, government agencies, and even haciendas or plantation estates. So you've got to remember we have had 2 women presidents, and one of them is one of my heroes, Corazon Aquino. And so when I was growing up, there were a lot of examples of women in leadership positions in politics and in business. And as I went through life, as well, early on, I was also very aware that there was a lot of inequality and poverty around me in the Philippines. And my mother used to take us siblings as often as she could to try to volunteer with community charity activities. And that really had an effect on us. And I have to say that it instilled in us this kind of duty, that privilege comes with responsibilities. And these are values that I try to and strive to live by every day, and that I hope my 4 children also grow up with.
Those are wonderful values to be instilled in you at such a young age. But can you tell us, what is it like being a female leader in Asia, championing Women on a Mission and Her Planet Earth? And are there areas where you think or you see gender parity needs to be reached?
So, being a female leader in Asia is very interesting because Asia is, one of the biggest regions in the world, first of all. 60% of the world's population is in this part of the world. And it is also one of the most diverse and culturally rich areas. So depending on where you're working and living, being a leader as a woman is a very different experience. So if you look at the whole region, and look at things like diversity and inclusion, gender equality, it varies greatly depending on the country. So the way we approach progression of women in leadership, for example, or even cultural norms for women and girls' role in society or access to education, or even how we invite women to join the workforce and remain in the workforce. So it's extremely different. And you probably heard that in earlier this year when the gender gap report came out, the 2021 gender gap report came out, it showed us that at this trajectory, we are really 135 years away from closing the gender gap. And that's very much a reality for many countries in Asia. But what's also interesting to note is that Asia is the home of two of the most gender equal societies in the world, the Philippines and New Zealand. But we also have the other extreme. We have other countries that are way below the global average, like Japan and South Korea, which are actually first world countries. So still a lot of progress needs to be done, and there has been great change and progress over the last few decades. But basically in our part of the world, we just need to continue to push for women in leadership positions at all levels of society, because we need to make more people believe, both men and women, that diversity really does matter. Not just in terms of principle, but because it breeds innovation, and innovation breeds business success in the long term.
You raised a really good point. We can't have a conversation about gender equality without mentioning our better half, our spouses, men, right? So where do you think men can come in and really support and push forward this cause for gender equality, Christine?
It's a great question, Yvonne, and I love that question because I'm always bringing this up. I want more men to come and support this fight for gender equality. It can't be women always advocating for this, and men can do that in very, very different, simple ways. The first of all, they should listen to women's groups, and what are some of the initiatives that we care about, that we're pushing for, and they should listen in a way that inspires trust and respect. I think the second way that men can support is also by sharing their social capital, their connection, their resources and company, opening up their network, and really supporting in that way. And I think the third one, honestly, is that we need more men to champion this cause, not just to be passive, listeners of us advocating for this. Because, a lot of causes like violence against women, inequalities, sexual abuse of women and children are often thought as women's issues. But in fact, they're also men's issues. They're society's issues. And we can't have men be silent about this. We need their full participation. Otherwise, it will be, something that will continue to be, unchecked in our communities and our universities and our societies and organizations. So men really need to step up and come on this partnership journey with us to advocate for more gender equality.
It is a partnership journey, isn't it? And you raised such a good point that what is typically known and characterized as or stereotyped as women's issues, like violence and sexual abuse, they're not women's issues. They are society's issues, and no gender should turn a blind eye to it.
Absolutely.
Right, Christine? Very quickly, too, I want you to talk to me about environmental conversation and your work there. So what is the relationship between female empowerment and climate change? And maybe tell us a bit more about your focus on your efforts with Her Planet Earth.
Sure. So the journey for me to set up Her Planet Earth actually started with my first NGO. So I set up an NGO about 9 years ago with two friends and co-founders. This is called Women on a Mission. You mentioned it in your introduction.
Yeah, that's right.
And this really opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that women are facing around the world. I mean, Women on a Mission supports women who are affected by violence and abuse through our challenging expeditions. We raise funds for them around the world, but it also allowed me to understand that women are disproportionately affected by so many other things, not just crisis and conflict, but also climate change. So this is why I set up my second NGO in parallel, Her Planet Earth, to really come to the aid and support of underprivileged women affected by climate change. And there's really a strong connection between both female empowerment and climate change as well.
What have you seen in terms of the women that were affected by climate change? Do you have some examples to share with us?
Sure. So, if you look at the world population, at the 1.3 billion poor people around the world, 70% of them are women. And so anytime a crisis hits, of course, it's women who are most affected. And if you look at many countries around the world, women are more vulnerable to climate change, environmental degradation, and partly because they make up the larger share of the agricultural workforce. And this is very true in Asia especially. And as a result, they also have access to fewer income earning jobs. But what's also interesting and encouraging is that even though women are the most vulnerable to climate change, we are also a huge part of the solution. And one of the best ways to mitigate climate change is to empower, invest in, and support women and help them build livelihoods that are eco-friendly and compatible and in harmony with nature. And this is what has been my focus with the last 4 years with Her Planet Earth. Our mission is really to make women more climate change resilient and also be kind to nature. And so we've been funding various projects projects around the world.
Tell us about some of these projects. I'm so curious because putting them in more eco-friendly environments, maybe, or homes. Tell us more.
Absolutely. So over the last few years, we've funded a series of projects, and some of them are in Africa, for example. So elephant sanctuaries that rescue hurt and baby elephants. So the funds that we raised were for them to employ more women to care for these animals that are such a big part of the ecosystem, in Africa. Other parts, for example, were projects in the Philippines that help women grow organic fruit and vegetables as a solution to overfishing. So again, making them more climate change resilient while being kind to nature.
Yes.
And a big part of our investment and fundraising has gone to support projects in agriculture. So in countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Nepal, that are very affected by climate change. So these are programs that help women grow crops that are more suited for the soil in their region. So for example, peanuts in areas that have erosion in mountainous areas, or even lotus flowers instead of rice when it's there's too much water, so they have to switch to lotus, for example, which are really commercially viable. And so again, it helps them build stronger livelihood so that when climate keeps changing, and these are women that are already feeling the brunt of climate change, they are a bit more resilient. And again, these are crops that are good for the earth as well in this part of the world.
I see now how you're making these women who are part of Her Planet Earth projects really a lot more climate aware, climate resilient, and so more sustainable livelihoods for them as well. And it's great that you say, the women who are most affected by climate change, they are also the easiest solutions to combat climate change. Wonderful, Christine. Can you also tell us more about your work as a very strong advocate of diversity, equity, inclusion? Why do you think it is so important, and how do we then promote that DEI and strengthen it within our own organizations and communities?
So yes, absolutely. The diversity, equity, and inclusion is something I'm deeply passionate about and have been advocating for many years, especially with my first NGO, Women on a Mission. And having diversity, equity, and inclusion in organization is not a quick fix. It's something that takes time, and it's a progressive way of changing a company's culture. And the reason we should all have that in organization is simply because without strong policies in place for DEI, companies are missing out on the full potential of their employees, and the business case for DEI has grown stronger every year. So, when you have strong policies and a culture of DEI being very strong, you have more employee retention and satisfaction, more innovation and creativity, and even companies have been shown to be more profitable in the long term. So that's absolutely, without a doubt, the right way to grow and develop a company culture. And there are many ways to do it, and even though it does take time, there are some simple practical ways to do that, So for example, the first thing that needs to happen is really to make sure that there's equity. So basically that every opportunity is available for all employees in an equal way, and they can have a chance for advancements of having those policies in place. Because without equity, then having initiatives around diversity and inclusion are commendable, but are not sustainable in the long term. So that really has to come first, equity. And once that's in place, and thriving, then you can really celebrate diverse workforce, and you can do this in so many creative ways by encouraging, women's groups and LGBTQ groups and minority groups, and really respecting those differences and elevating and celebrating that. And then inclusion then can follow nicely because it's also an employee's sense of belonging, which is so important. And it can come through communication training as well, teaching employees and leaders in different organizations to use language that's more inclusive so that everybody feels part of the conversation.
That's wonderful, Christine. And we come back to something a lot more current right now, and that is the pandemic. Clearly that's affected all genders on many fronts for many, many months right now. How has the pandemic affected women and gender equality? What have you seen in the last few months?
So unfortunately, the pandemic and its economic repercussions have had a regressive effect on gender equality. And so women have really suffered the brunt of this crisis. In many ways, women have suffered most of the job losses. I think it was in 2020, over 64 million women lost their jobs. That's 5% of the number of women around the world holding jobs versus 3.9% for men. So it's been massive. I think women lost income of close to $800 billion US. And the reason for that is that a lot of the child care support, the schools that were closed because of the pandemic, you know, the lockdowns, the restrictions have affected women, and women are still the primary caregivers in many homes around the world. So that's really impacted them, and as well as the fact that because of the gender inequality that still exists around the world, women hold the lower income jobs, they hold the less secure jobs, they have less of a safety net, and so when companies were cutting jobs, again, women suffered the brunt of that and lost the most number of jobs around the world. So it's really been an issue. It's moved us back, I feel, a few years in terms of our progression and with the gender parity movement that we're trying to push for. And as we come out of the pandemic, what's really important is that employers and companies around the world really need to support women, give them more flexibility at work, you know, give them more safety nets, and support them in different ways with childcare support. Otherwise, they'll have to, again, choose between their careers and caring for their children.
But it can be done, right? Being a mom that's present for your children and a successful career woman. I mean, I'm talking to her right now, right, Christine? You've been a professional, a marketing professional for over 10 years, working in very many countries around the world. You're a full-time social entrepreneur, championing various causes, and you are a mother of 4. How do you juggle it all and still look this good?
Oh, Yvonne, you're too kind. You know, and I have to say that, you know, I've been very lucky with the support I have. First of all, you know, I have a great support at home. My husband is incredibly supportive of everything I've been doing with my career. I have a wonderful nanny, you know, I have flexible work hours. And so all that contributes. You know, when my children were a bit younger, my mom used to come over and support me and help me in different ways when I had trips. And I really do think it takes a village to raise a child, you know, that beautiful African proverb. It's not just the parents, it's the extended family and sometimes the community. So that's been a huge help for me, absolutely, and allowed me to do so many things with my life and with my career.
Are you instilling your passions and your values into your kids right now? When they know mommy's away on expeditions, you know, raising funds for the underprivileged, what do they say?
So you know how it is with kids. I know you have 2 kids too, Yvonne.
Two young ones.
You can tell them, you know, that you want them to do this or they should do this, but the truth is they watch what you do, you know, as opposed to doing what you tell them to do, right? So I think with me over the years, what I've noticed is that they're aware, you know, they're aware that what I'm doing, and sometimes I hear my kids telling other friends, my mommy helps other mummies, you know.
That's
so they
nice.
simplify it. So for them, they're just, you know, mommy's doing her own thing, and I know when she goes on expeditions and she's away from us for a few weeks, you know, she's trying to raise funds. So they have an idea, and you know, nowadays kids are little philanthropists themselves. You know, what I love about the way education is changing is that in a lot of schools, you know, kids get asked to fundraise for different initiatives. And so they understand this whole concept of trying to support people that may not have the same privileges that you have, and that you can do it in different ways through events and expedition and different fundraising activities. So I do feel that philanthropy has moved in many different creative ways, and children understand much more than we think. You know, they watch what we do, and action speaks much louder than words oftentimes.
I couldn't agree more. And that is so sweet that they just simplified it, and mommy's helping other mummies, and that's exactly what you're doing. So do you have any advice to younger women who are watching this conversation today? What advice would you give them in terms of, you know, how they shape their careers and if they wanted to make a positive impact in this world? What would you say to them?
So, you know, for me, you know, and I have a lot of mentees in my life. I'm lucky to have that. I have mentors and mentees. But for a lot of younger women, what I would tell them would be that, you know, go after your dreams fearlessly, you know, with passion and dedication, and work hard. But don't forget to keep pushing for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because this is how we'll build a more sustainable and fairer world together. And ultimately, I really believe that unless we have more equity in our society, we won't be able to have, you know, a sustainable environment and gender equality and peace even. You know, it affects so many facets of our lives. So that's my message to younger women. You know, go for it. Don't be afraid to shoot really high for what you want to do in your life. But don't forget to push for other women, support other women as well in their career. You know, take them along with you as you rise up. You know, and so that's my message to them.
That's a beautiful message. You've heard of the saying, women supporting women. When women support other women, great things can be achieved. And
So
I think
true.
that really sums up this conversation today. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you, Christine. I feel like I've also gained a lot just from listening to you today. And really, it's that reminder to keep that mindset of DEI, you know, always living and breathing it, even when you go out and meet different people in different scenarios. And remembering, again, who you can take with you along the journey as you
Absolutely.
shoot for your dreams.
No, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Yvonne. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. You've been watching The Game Changers She Talks, brought to you by Credit Suisse. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.